Africa has a rich and complex history, but there is widespread ignorance of its heritage. A celebrated British historian once said, there was only the history of Europeans in Africa. But what is behind the lack of knowledge about African history, if one may really ask? The Great Pyramids of Giza in Cairo is rightly considered one of the 7 wonders of ancient world. But travel further south along River Nile and you will find 1,000 pyramids that belong to the kingdom of Kush in what is now Sudan. Kush was an African superpower and its influence extended to what is now the Middle East. The kingdom lasted for many hundreds of years, and in the 18th century BC, it conquered Egypt and governed for the best part of the century. What remains of the kingdom is equally impressive. More than 300 of these pyramids, to your surprise, are still intact. Almost untouched since they were built nearly 3,000 years ago. Some of the best examples can be found in Jebel Bakal in northern Sudan, which was declared a World Heritage Site by the UN's cultural agency, UNESCO. Here you can find pyramids, tombs, temples and burial chambers complete with painted scenes and writings that UNESCO describes as masterpieces of creative genius, demonstrating the artistic, social, political and religious values of human groups for more than 2,000 years. It turns out that one of UNESCO's and the continent's best kept secret is Africa's history written by African scholars. During the period of rapid decolonization in Africa, some of the newly independent African leaders decided that after decolonizing their countries, they also wanted to decolonize their history. Western historians had lamented the lack of written records in some African countries and had used this as a reason to legitimize such neglect. UNESCO helped African scholars put together the project, recruiting 350 experts, mostly from across Africa and from a range of disciplines, to compile 8 volumes starting from prehistory and continuing to the modern era. The 8th volume was completed in 1990 and a 9th is now being worked on. UNESCO took to the controversial step of starting the volumes with the origins of humankind, setting out the theory of evolution. By doing so, they risked incurring the wrath of Christian and Muslim communities in some African countries where there was and still is a widespread belief in creationism. Kenyan paleontologist Richard Ricky, who contributed to volume 1, says he still believes that the fact humans originated in Africa is something unlike some Westerners who would prefer to deny their African origins. The story of the Kingdom of Kush, a superpower in Western Asia as well as Africa, where queens could rule in their own right, is also often overlooked. This is also true of the Kingdom of Aksum, described as one of the 4 greatest civilizations of the ancient world. The Aksumite kings controlled trade in the Red Sea from the base in what is modern-day Eritrea and Ethiopia. They were also the first rulers in Africa to embrace Christianity and make it their kingdom's official religion. This history is little known, both in Africa and elsewhere. Why? Because a lot of academics and teachers in African countries have been a product of colonial education themselves, and so they could not receive a comprehensive and chronological account of their own history. One such view was reflected in the comments by Hugh Trevor Roper, widely regarded as one of the British's foremost historians. He said in 1965, perhaps, in the future, there will be African history to teach, but at present, there is none, or very little. There is only the history of Europeans in Africa. The rest is largely darkness, like the history of pre-European, pre-Columbian American, and darkness is not a subject of history. The fact that very few people know about the volumes compiled under the auspices of UNESCO also tells you something. You wonder why leaders did not want to shine more light on it. I'm not suggesting there was a conspiracy, of course, just that there was not enough emphasis placed on African history by either African or non-African leaders. This is of particular interest for Africa, though because it has been infantilized to a degree that we have not seen in any other region of the world. There has been a way of seeing Africa in terms of poverty and conflict, coups, wars, famine, corruption, which has become a kind of shorthand for a continent that still persists today. Development issues in Africa still, to a large extent, emphasize charitable aspects and aid. Although this is done with the best will in the world, it has nevertheless fed into this representation of Africa, whereby it is assumed that in order for its people to develop and for them to have enough to eat, they have to rely on outsiders. No, this is supposed to be otherwise. The general history of Africa is a start, and UNESCO plans to incorporate its research into school syllabuses across the continent. Hopefully, future generations will have a better idea of their history and see that there is much for them to be proud of from their own past. A past which provides the foundation for an even greater future. You can't help but become enraged when you realize how much Europeans destroyed and stole from Africa's history and then repressed it with their own. And the idea that some claim that Africa has no history is also absurd. Even Hegel, in an apparent attempt to besmirch Africa, once asserted that Africa is no historical part of the world. It has no movement or development to exhibit. But societies throughout sub-Saharan Africa have preserved knowledge about the past through verbal, visual, and written art forms. Records and narratives kept by African historians are among the most informative sources for the reconstruction of pre-colonial history on the continent. It was argued at the time that Africa had no history because history begins with writing and thus with the arrival of Europeans. Their presence in Africa was therefore justified, among other things, by their ability to place Africa in the path of history. The history of Africa has tended to rely on written evidence, but Africans had their own particular system of recording past events, situations, and traditions before Europeans started writing about it. As a result, non-African historians used written documentations to chart the history of the continent. So well indeed, if one ever asked, what is Africa's best kept secret? We all shall shout out our voices highly and say, it's history. It is its history, the best kept secret for Africa. Unless otherwise, what do you think, dear brother or sister? My name is Osie The Born Child, and thank you so much for watching African Diaspora News Channel. Until next time, I'll be seeing you in another video. But hey, come in the comment section and discuss with me. What do you think is Africa's best kept secret?